Hello and welcome to another episode of Business on the Wire. As the Indian economy continues to struggle through the lockdown, what are the possible solutions both for different state-center relations as also what opposition parties might be recommending to the center to implement and help particularly the lowest strata of society? Joining me now, Senior Congress Leader Jairam Ramesh for some of what the Congress has recommended and what their views are on the economy. Thank you, Mr. Ramesh, for joining in. Recently, the Congress apparently submitted some proposals to the center specifically for food and for the poor. Could you walk us through what it is that was included in the proposals?
Well, the Congress president has written to the Prime Minister six letters since the lockdown started, the 23rd of March. And she has covered a wide variety of issues there of concern to the people, whether it's the farmers, the agricultural labor, the migrant workers, the workers in the unorganized sector, health workers who are in the front line. I mean, she has covered all issues and food supply, employment, loss of livelihoods. So, six letters in a space of about a month. Unfortunately, I think many of these recommendations have not been implemented fully. They've been implemented, in a half-hearted and lackadaisical manner, and we are still waiting for the government to respond to these suggestions. The distress of large sections of society is what she has highlighted in her communications, particularly as we have seen the migrant workers, particularly people who have lost their livelihoods and basically have had to go back to their homes without any financial support. So this is an ongoing exercise. We have now, the Congress Party has asked for public ideas on revival of the MSME sector. We have prepared our own set of proposals. But before we take it forward, the party decided that we would get feedback from various industry associations in different parts of the country, which we have got. And hopefully very soon we'll be submitting these to the government here. I mean, the point I wish to make is that the government should be showing far greater speed, far greater, effectiveness in coming up with packages for different sections of society. And I think, forget compassion and sensitivity, the speed is also has been what is missing. We've been reading about stimulus packages, we've been reading about task forces, but what do they amount to in actual practice? Precious little, I'm afraid.
Within the recommendations and suggestions, I want to focus specifically on food, Mr. Ramesh, which is really blowing up into a bit of a crisis, especially in the rural parts of India. What were the Congress's suggestions in terms of addressing the food scarcity that exists at this point for many people who are stranded on the road?
The first thing to recognize is that there is no shortage in terms of food production. There's no shortage in terms of stocks. I mean, the problem is one of distribution. And as the Congress-led UPA government came up with the National Food Security Act in September 2013, which was criticized very heavily by the present Prime Minister at that point of time. But then subsequently, he saw the value of this legislation and it was implemented. And what the Congress president has done in her communication to the Prime Minister is to remind him of the National Food Security Act and said that, look, at this present moment of time, for the lockdown period, 10 kg of food grains, 1 kg of dal, and half a kg of sugar per person would be the barest minimum that should be supplied. Whether you have a ration card, don't have a ration card, these are not issues to be really dealt with at a time of acute crisis and suffering. And these recommendations were made, a couple of weeks ago. In fact, one of her first letters to the Prime Minister was on food supply. And since she was very closely associated, in fact, in many ways, she spearheaded the National Food Security Act of 2013. She felt particularly strongly about it. I don't see the government responding the way it should have. As I said, record stocks with the Food Corporation of India, and people are dying for want of food. So 10 kg for food grains per person in a family, whether ration card, not ration card, that's not an issue to be dealt with during the lockdown period. After the lockdown period, we can get into this debate of ration card, not ration card. But when there is a lockdown period, I think these discussions become very, very academic.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I wanted to raise, because the ration card seems to be a huge stumbling block in terms of people actually being able to access supplies. For the Congress led states, is that something that has been put into practice, that ration supplies and food will be provided regardless of any paperwork one might be carrying with them?
Well, the Chhattisgarh government, for example, has taken the position that it doesn't matter whether there's a ration card or not a ration card for the period of the lockdown. Food is what matters, and we have the supply, and we have the PDS network, and we have the National Food Security Act. And I think, it really. I mean, this debate of ration card, non-ration card, as I said, we can put off till a month or so, after which hopefully the lockdown would be eased. But for the lockdown period, and we've already lost 2.5, 3 weeks. It was almost, well, exactly 4 weeks since the lockdown, 4 weeks and a couple of days. And this suggestion that was made by the Congress president was within a few days of the lockdown being implemented. The first letter, among the first letters she wrote, was on the PDS and on ensuring a minimum level of food security to people both in urban areas as well as in rural areas.
How has the experience been so far in terms of federal cooperation, Mr. Ramesh? Has there been enough communication between the center and the states, including the Congress led states, on vital issues like food supply and other kinds of arrangements for especially migrant labor that are stranded?
Well, I'm happy that the Prime Minister is discovering the value and virtue of consultations with the chief ministers. Formerly he would not even give appointments to chief ministers, but now he is, engaging them on video conference. But I must point out that one of the consequences of this, lockdown, and the way the lockdown has been designed and managed, is that we may slide into over centralization once the lockdown is eased. In fact, one of the lessons that this crisis should teach us is the values and virtues of decentralization, of not only strengthening the states financially and administratively, but also strengthening local bodies in urban areas and rural areas, administratively and financially. And my great worry, my great fear is that if and when the lockdown gets eased and we go back to some semblance of normalcy, obviously it's not going to be 100% normal, but some semblance of normalcy, these centralizing tendencies which are inbuilt in the BJP's DNA and in Mr. Modi's DNA, will continue. And I think that's the big danger, and we have to watch out for it. I mean, the way, for example, the central teams have gone. Nobody says central teams shouldn't go, but surely the chief ministers should be kept informed. Surely there must be some consultation process with the chief ministers. So I think all that, on that score, this is not the time to raise these issues, because we must now be fighting this crisis single-mindedly. But I do hope that once, we in the post-May 3rd situation, we don't become an over-centralized democracy. In fact, over the last couple of decades, the movement has been to empower states, has been to empower panchayats and nagarpalikas, and that should now be strengthened and intensified. And that's the great example of Kerala. I mean, one of the great examples of outstanding lessons of Kerala's management of the virus of the pandemic is the value of decentralized institutions.
Mm. What we do have and will have for a while now is a deep economic problem, though, Mr. Ramesh. And it's not something we've inherited just because of COVID. We've had 7 quarters of a slowdown so far. How hard do you think it's going to be for the Indian economy to get back on its feet?
Well, Mr. Modi has found the perfect excuse. And now, 6 quarters of consecutive GDP growth decline brought about by the lingering effects of the demonetization, the hastily implemented GST, the atmosphere of fear caused by overzealous and over-empowered tax authorities. The investment levels were at all-time lows. And we know exports were stagnant, if not falling, and GDP growth, as you yourself pointed out, over 6 quarters, a steady decline, and there were no green shoots of a recovery. But now, Mr. Modi has found the perfect excuse. He can always say that, look, 2020-21 was a lost year, not because of me, but because of the coronavirus. And so he can find a justification. But I think it's important to recognize that the economy was in intensive care even before this crisis overtook us. We were skating on thin ice in terms of investment, in terms of exports, in terms of consumption growth, in terms of the overall environment for investment. Things have become even more difficult. Things have become even more grim, over the past month and a half. The MSME sector, particularly, has borne the brunt of the crisis. But I think no sector has been actually immune from this crisis, and so therefore, I think recovery. I don't see a V recovery taking place. A sharp fall and a sharp rise. I may see many years ago I wrote about, 15 years ago I wrote about a V versus a W when people made fun of me, saying that I was taking liberties with the alphabet. But yeah, we may not see an L, we'll certainly not see a V, but we may see a W. Yeah, I mean, we may see a slow recovery, we may see a cutback once again, a decline once again. I mean, it's really uncertain. If clearly external exports is not going to be the engine of growth. I mean, if you were going to be banking on exports, that's not going to happen. So that's one thing very clear. It has to be domestic investment and domestic consumption. There are limits to domestic consumption, being the stimulus. So ultimately, I think we are left with good old public investment, which for the last 30 years has been derided and criticized by the great advocates and champions of economic reforms. And I think today we are now rediscovering the values of government investment again.
The other huge problem that the country will have to face is one of unemployment, Mr. Ramesh. Will it still have to be public sector spending that will have to boost or save the unemployment situation? At current tick, we're going at 26%.
In the short run, I don't see any alternative to public expenditure. And therefore, a complete I've called for a couple of weeks ago, I myself have said a ruthless review of public expenditure is called for, so that we really prioritize public expenditure, because I don't see private expenditure, or private consumption, or even private investment, which was very anemic. Even in the pre-crisis period, I don't see private investment suddenly, flowering out. So it has to be public expenditure. And the priorities for public expenditure. So, you clearly have to make sure that, you don't spend thousands of crores on redesigning the city of Delhi, the Central Vista. That money is better spent, protecting and reviving, say, for example, the MSME sector. So I think, I mean, I don't see, by the way, I don't see how the government can get away without presenting a revised budget in sometime in July. Because the budget of February 1st 2020 has become completely, it was bogus to begin with. It's now become completely bogus. The numbers and the assumptions were completely unrealistic when the finance minister presented a budget in February. Now, of course, all those assumptions have gone out of the window. The very architecture of the budget has not been weakened; it's been destroyed. So, I think the least that the government should be doing is to presenting a budget in July. I mean, it's not as if budgets have not been presented in July. Dr. Manmohan Singh's historic budget was on July 24th, 1991, and Mr. Jaitley's first budget was in July, and Nirmala Sitharaman's first budget was in July, if you remember, of 2019. So I think the very minimum that I expect the government to do is to come back to Parliament in July with a completely redesigned budget.
It's not a government that's flush with funds either, Mr. Ramesh. I'm sure you've had chance to see the recent changes in the FDI norms, particularly with reference to China. And one observation is that there seems to be a lumping of everything and anything under the same umbrella. Now, this has been, a FEMA notification has been issued, which means that this now comes into effect. What have you read of the changes that we've brought about on the FDI side?
Well, I think it's nobody's case that we shouldn't protect Indian firms. We should be protecting Indian firms, and I think the former Congress president had raised this issue, and I think the government did right in not standing on prestige and saying, okay, we are not going to allow this opportunity to be used by companies to pick up valuable Indian assets at throwaway prices, which was going to be the case when the Bank of China, the Chinese bank, was increasing its stake in HDFC from 0.8% to 1%. There was a psychological barrier of 1%. And I have nothing to fault with that. I mean, it's just that it required the government to move after the former Congress president, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, had tweeted about this.
Are you hopeful of any all-party meeting being convened at any point in the next few weeks to get greater communication, greater interaction with other points of view, Mr. Ramesh?
I have no expectations from this Prime Minister. His style is not consultative. He's going through the motions of the meeting with the CMs. I don't think he really believes in a consultative process. He's never had an all-party meeting in the last 6 years. Why would he have an all-party meeting now? He's the omnipotent one. He's the omniscient one. He's the omnipresent one. And Aham Brahmasmi, I know everything. So I don't expect him to have any all-party meetings with the political parties, political leaders, and actually come with an open mind, listen to suggestions, and implement those suggestions. Having an all-party meeting means you interact. Prime Minister doesn't interact. Prime Minister gives farmans and fatwas, and issues orders. You have to interact. You have to say, okay, this is what you have said. This is what I think. And through a process of interaction and consultation, something emerges. That's not his style. It's not been a style as chief minister. It's not been a style as prime minister. So I expect he will continue this process of interaction with the chief ministers. It's good optics for him. How much he actually does or not is a separate issue, because he's interested only in the optics of it, actually.
One final question to you, Mr. Ramesh, not related to politics or economics, because I know you're as passionate about the environment. How do you think the country will emerge from this period of lockdown where nature itself has had time to heal and recover? Do you think we will approach our resources in a different light?
Well, I'm chairman of the Standing Committee on Environment and Forest and Climate Change. And, we've, in the last couple of months, been working to present a report on public health and the environment, looking at environmental issues, air pollution, water pollution, chemical contamination, land degradation from a public health point of view. Now, of course, we have added a new dimension. Climate change, of course, is also a dimension, but now, of course, the current virus epidemic, the pandemic, has added a whole new dimension. And I've asked for, from in the social media, I've asked people to give for feedback, and we've received a lot of interesting suggestions from people, from organizations, from research institutions on what we should be doing in the area of environmental protection in view of the crisis that we have gone through. And we should be, submitting this report sometime, hopefully by maybe July or August, to look at the whole issue of pollution, contamination, degradation, climate change, from a public health perspective, because that's really now a topmost concern. But let me share with you, Mithali, that I do have my worries that in a post lockdown period, the government may well say we need faster growth, we need faster revival, we need faster investment, and therefore they will go even more easy on environmental clearances than they have been in the last 6 years. In fact, last couple of days, the environment minister, has been tweeting merrily that so many projects have been cleared virtually. How do you clear a project virtually? How do you do due diligence on environmental impact assessment virtually? So I think environmental clearances have been a joke in the last 6 years. They'll become even more of a joke. And now the mantra will be not ease of doing business, but speed of reviving business. And that, I think, in the long term is going to be detrimental. If we are going to loosen environmental laws in the name of economic recovery, I think we are going to be digging a bigger hole for ourselves, because I think the fact that we have not taken environmental and ecological issues seriously has been one of the contributory factors to the overall situation which has enabled this crisis to thrive. So I think we should in fact use this crisis to revisit the cavalier manner in which we deal with environmental issues. I mean, recently the government has cleared some major projects in Karnataka, for example, which will involve major loss of habitat in the Western Ghats. And this will have devastating consequences locally as well as for climate change and global warming. So, if anything, this crisis teaches us one lesson that the ancient Indians taught us and which modern Indians have forgotten, which is Prakriti Rakshati Rakshataha. Nature protects those who protect it. You protect nature, nature will protect you. You disturb nature, nature will hit back at you. I mean, this is a lesson that the Upanishads taught us thousands of years ago, but we have forgotten in our mad desire for being the fastest growing economy in the world, $5 trillion economy, and so on and so forth. Which it cannot be at the cost of the environment.
Indeed, Mr. Ramesh. I hope that all of us move forward, not for now, but for our generations to come. Thank you very much for speaking with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I enjoyed it.